Welcome back to the greatest podcast in the world, if we may say so ourselves. That always cracks me up. Thanks, everybody, for coming back. I am one of your hosts. I am Michael, and I am here to guide you through this journey for today's episode. Thank you all for taking the time out to listen. Please tell 50 friends to tell 50 friends, like I always say. I thank you all for taking out 25 to 30 to 35 to 40 minutes of your lives to come hang out with me and hear me ramble. I really do appreciate that, but you all know that. You all know I love you, even if I don't show it all the time. Anyway, let me just get into the stuff. From week to week, I don't usually have ideas talking about rambling. I don't usually have ideas of what I'm going to talk about. And when me and Reggie first started this thing, ideas were like falling out of the sky. I had so many ideas that me and Reggie, we would be able to record multiple episodes in one day. It's like we would plan a whole Saturday and just get on at like noon and just be kicking it until like 9 o'clock at night. That's how much the ideas were flowing. And we would just record episode after episode after episode, chop them up, chop them up, chop them up. And if you go back and listen to some of those episodes, it probably sounds like we recorded multiple episodes in one day. So it was a process, but it was a beautiful thing though, having ideas that just flowed like water. Now, as of this episode, we are 79 episodes in. And I want to take this opportunity once again to thank you all for allowing us to make it to 79 episodes by listening to this mess. But the ideas, they don't necessarily flow like they once did. Instead of flowing like water, sometimes they flow like mud. And that's just part of the process. Some people refer to it as writer's block. I guess I would refer to this as podcast block, whatever. But it's all good because what I do have, my ace in the hole, I have the universe. See, being the Virgo that I am, my natural instinct in life in general is to low key obsess about stuff. It's what Virgos do. We do it well, but one thing we also do well is we play it off well. So you may never know it. But yeah, that's what we do. And in this case, uh, the obsession was about what I'm going to talk about from episode to episode. At least that was when Reggie started suffering from his social anxiety or whatever and stopped coming on the podcast or whatever. Then it was like, oh my goodness, what am I going to do from week to week? Blah, 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 blah. And now looking at it 79 episodes in, this podcast and the topics of discussion are the least of my worries. And again, that's because of the universe. I say all this for a reason, not just to complain about not having show ideas or anything like that. I have show ideas, but there's a point to this, like there's a point in everything that I'll talk about on these shows. So last week, as usual, while having no real idea what to talk about, but just waiting for the universe to open up and bestow something upon me, I started watching a documentary on this band called Genesis. And I say this band called Genesis as if they were some kind of like local indie band or something like that. Most of you all, even if you don't listen to that genre of music, you should know who Genesis is. And if you have some kind of issue with me watching a documentary on Genesis, yo, don't judge me. Remember, this is the no judgment zone. So I don't judge you. You don't judge me. But for those of you that don't know Genesis or don't know the details, it was the group that featured Peter Gabriel, who was famous for the song Sledgehammer. For people who are around, I think that was in the late 80s, I want to say. And Phil Collins, who was also in the group and became the lead singer. And he was famous for many things. He was super big, but one of his bigger hits that still resonates today is In the Air Tonight. I would try to sing it, but you don't want that. You really don't want that. But it's funny that those two, while they were members of the band, those songs that I just referenced, Sledgehammer and In the Air Tonight, those weren't Genesis records. Those were records that they put out as part of their solo careers. In Peter Gabriel's case, it was after he actually left the band. Now, I don't know what that says about the dynamic of the group, that their biggest hits that are attributed to the groups weren't actually songs from the group, but by artists that were in the groups. It's like they just took their best records and kept them for themselves and just gave the band just like average records or whatever, which is kind of selfish and kind of foul, low key. But with that said, Genesis had some hits though. They had joints though. They had like that song Invisible Touch. They also had a song called I Can't Dance. Songs that I remember. Actually, I remember a lot of their joints, but they had hits. They sold a lot of records. They did good. They did well, rather. They just didn't have hits like Sledgehammer and In the Air Tonight. And let me just say this, for Black people, they might not know who Genesis is. They might not even know who Phil Collins is, but they know In the Air Tonight. They know that song. And part of it might be because part of its popularity is attributable to it being like featured on Miami Vice back when Miami Vice was so hot. But that song just resonates with the brothers and sisters for some reason. As a matter of fact, off the top of my head, there are three songs that I can think of, again, off the top of my head, that Black people that don't listen to pop or rock, anything like that, they only stick strictly to R&B, hip hop, jazz, stuff like that. No pop, no rock. Three songs that they know, not just know and like. Follow me on this. The songs are Under the Bridge by Red Hot Chili Peppers, like I already mentioned, In the Air Tonight by Phil Collins. And for whatever reason, one is some Bon Jovi song. It's either Living on a Prayer or Wanted Dead or Alive. They might not know who made the songs again, but they know those songs. And I can hear people right now saying, I know other songs. What about this song? And what about that song? And you could be right. I don't know. Email me the songs, Michael at datingwhileadulting.com, and we can have a discussion about it. But I'm talking about pop slash rock songs that are pretty much universally accepted in the Black community. Those three. I don't know any Black person, unless they're like 20s or whatever, that doesn't know those joints and doesn't like those joints. Anyway, you the point is, you all know me by now, and you know that I mentioned all of that to get to a point about this episode. So going back to the Genesis documentary, specifically Phil Collins, before I get off the rails again, one of the stories that interested me was that while he was on tour with the band Genesis, in the midst of his many infidelities, living the rock star life, he decided that he wasn't feeling his second wife anymore. So he broke up with her. Honestly, I don't care about that. That was what it was. On a side note, see, here I go getting off the rails again. I have no idea why singers get married, especially when you get to a certain level of success. And I don't understand why women would marry them if love is really the intent. Now, if it's a money thing, I get that from the woman's standpoint. If it's just like, yo, I can hit a lick by being with this dude and then I can do my own thing on the side, hey, I'm all for that. But if it's love, I don't really get it. And in Phil Collins's case, he wasn't super Phil Collins at the time he got married to his second wife, but he was still Genesis Phil Collins, which was pretty big. I mean, they were touring the world, making money and all of that stuff. So he was a legitimate rock star when they got married, and they still got married. They got married, and then they still got married. Yeah. Anyway, follow me. So she had to know that he'd be tempted. You know, if you're really thinking about it, you can't seriously think that all of those women coming at your dude, he's going to resist every single one of them. It's almost like you need to make an allotment. Like, okay, if you're going to do this, like MC Light said, yo, and I think it was the Roughneck song when she was like, yo, as long as you keep them in check, as long as I don't hear about them, and I wish I knew the exact line, but you get the gist of it. Yeah, there should just be certain expectations of what your man should be expected to do, what he will do, and what he won't do. Anyway, anyway, it- there doesn't seem to be many people in this world, now that I'm thinking about it, that do well with temptation, with temptation from the opposite sex or the same sex, if that's what you're attracted to. And while the emphasis is mostly placed on men in that area, I'm finding more and more these days that women are finding it hard not to succumb to temptation as well. Yeah, see, ladies, it's you too. It's not just the fellas. But anyway, what got what got me interested in dudes breaking up with his second wife was that, and here's the important part, at least to me and to this show, he broke up with her via fax. He sent her a fax, and that's just saying, yo, I'm not with this anymore. Okay. Now, mind you, that his first marriage ended because she'd had a baby, and right after she had the kid, he wanted to go on tour with Genesis. And she gave him an ultimatum like, yo, either you stay here and help me raise this newborn baby of ours, or you go with the band and you tour. And he chose the band. That's a rough one because that's kind of how he makes his money. So to say you should leave them and come stay with me, leave them high and dry, or at least make them postpone, I don't know. It just seems like it's a hard choice. Not saying he made the right one, but I can understand the thinking in that, yo, this is how we make our living. This is how the band members make their living. I guess he could have pushed it back. I don't know. He gave her she gave him an ultimatum. He chose the band over staying with her and the kid. Now, with all of that said, I will give her credit on one thing. When he left to go on tour, so did she. He said that when he got back home after going on that tour or whatever, she was not there. She had not just moved out of the house, she moved to a whole different country. She moved to Canada. Hmm. But with all of that said, the takeaway from that documentary was the breaking up via fax. But even after seeing that documentary and being fascinated by the fax breakup and all of that stuff, it still didn't necessarily inspire an episode of this podcast. But then I saw an article a couple days later about Jennifer Flavin, and I can hear some of you saying, who? But you know me, you listen, you know I'll explain it. I I knew the name, but I didn't remember why I knew the name or where I knew the name from. So I started reading about her and come to find out, refreshing my memory and refreshing yours, if you even knew who she was in the first place. She used to be a model, but now she's married to Sylvester Stallone, and they have been married for 24 years. Who cares about that, you might ask? But what's interesting about that is back when they were dating, Sylvester Stallone, was having an affair with Janice Dickinson. And for people that don't know Janice Dickinson, boy, she was a model as well. She was on the earlier seasons of America's Next Top Model. She was the crazy one. Little did we know that that wasn't just an act. She was a different person for real. She's also one of the people that accused Bill Cosby of drugging her, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, yeah, that was her as well. But Sylvester Stallone was having a relationship with her back in the day while he was dating Jennifer Flavin. And Janice made him believe that she was pregnant with his child. Upon hearing this news, Sylvester Stallone, he broke up with Jennifer to be with Janice. And Here's where the tie comes in. While he didn't break up with Jennifer by fax, he did it by FedEx. So you tell me which is worse, being broken up via fax or being broken up with via FedEx. To me, FedEx seems worse because the whole idea of somebody knocking on your door, giving you a package, you opening up that package and not knowing what it is, that just seems to me to be a whole lot harsher than someone saying, getting the fax, hearing the fax machine going off in your office or whatever, and picking up the fax and saying, I don't know. When I get a FedEx, I just automatically assume it's something good. Whereas I don't get faxes anymore. But when I used to get faxes, I just used to think of faxes as not necessarily good or bad, just some kind of call to action, something that I had to do, something like that. But to go from getting a FedEx thinking that, oh, shoot, I got a package. This is something good, especially in this day and age with Amazon, even though Amazon wasn't around when she got the FedEx. Um, I just automatically think that this is a good thing that I'm receiving and good things will come from what I'm receiving. So the FedEx to me seems worse. But the point in all of that is that the universe? Is that not the universe talking to me or what? You come on now. One breaks up via fax, another one breaks up via FedEx. And I see both of these, the documentary and this article, in the same week. See, the universe bails me out once again. Now, with all of that said, I feel it's important to mention that Sly, he took a DNA test and found out that the kid wasn't his. Then he went back to Jennifer. She obviously took him back because 24 years later, well, you see, they're married, celebrating their anniversary. That had nothing to do with the breakups via fax, but I thought that was an interesting thing to note that Janice Dickinson was trying to play Sly. And on it, that leads me to another side note. Let all men take a lesson from this. If your side piece, and we talk a lot about side pieces on this podcast, if your side piece says that she's pregnant, always get a DNA test. Don't be like Neo. Neo, the singer who got a woman pregnant, accepted it as his own, started raising the kid. Then he finds out that the kid wasn't his. And to make matters worse, the mother, even after he found out that the kid wasn't his, the mother would still sue him for child support. Now, that's just a different level of foul. So the mother, knowing that the child wasn't his, still sued Neo for child support. And this is why men around the world always talk about child support, spousal support, and all of that stuff. When they talk about how foul it is, I have no debate on that. I have no kids, thank God. But the foul thing about it is they granted the child support to her because they said that Neo had gotten the child accustomed to a certain lifestyle, and it wouldn't be fair to the child to remove him from that lifestyle. Now, mind you, the mother of the child had gotten accustomed to a certain lifestyle as well, but nobody ever talks about that. And while I said I don't have an opinion on that, I guess that was me offering an opinion on that. I'm sorry. No judgment. Nah, this is judgment. That shit was foul. That shit was foul of her. But with that said, let's not get distracted. Phil Collins and Sylvester Stallone, their stories made me think about breakups, which ultimately is what these things inspired me to talk about, and the reason that we're talking about this on this episode today, which I'll touch on briefly. The topic that I'll touch on briefly. Anyway, tell the truth though. Aren't there some people in your past that you would have liked to have broken up with via fax or FedEx? Or shoot, for some of you all, maybe there's someone in your present that you like to do that too. Well, I while I don't know anybody that's done that, I do know a few people over the years that have either been broken up with or they've broken up with someone via text message. And I'm not talking about somebody that they've been going out and seeing a couple times, they've been on a couple of dates. I'm talking about somebody that they've been in full-fledged relationships with. Now, I've never done that. Well, of course, I wouldn't do anything like that now because I'm grown. But even in my teens and 20s, that would have been too low for me to do. Break up with somebody via text or fax or FedEx or anything like that that I've been in a relationship with. And it's important to note because in both of those cases, one was a wife and the other was a girlfriend that they were in relationships with. And thankfully, no one has ever done that to me. I I don't know that I would have been emotionally stable enough to accept a fax or a FedEx when I was in my 20s with that news. And cell phones, fortunately, weren't out when I was a kid, except for those old brick phones that you had to have be a millionaire to have. On a side note, when I got my first cell phone, it cost 45 cents a minute for local calls. That's neither here nor there. I just felt like mentioning that. But me personally, my breakups, they've evolved over the years. In the really early years, my breakups would be more like non-breakups. And what I mean by that is that because I was too much of a punk to tell the woman that I was in a relationship with that I didn't want to be with her anymore, I just suffer in silence, hoping that she'd get the point that I didn't want to be with her. That's what a lot of guys do, even to this day. They suffer in silence. Well, actually, they don't suffer in silence. They just go out and cheat to avoid breaking up and avoid the suffering in silence. Hey, whatever gets you through it. Well, I shouldn't say that because that's wrong to mislead someone. But anyway, that's what I did back in the day. And then suffering in silence and in typical passive aggressive fashion, eventually it would come out in not the best way that I didn't want to be with her anymore. Then, as I got a little bit older and a little bit more experienced, my breakups evolved into my starting fights with the woman that I was dating with the hope that she would end it out of frustration. And even if she came back, I could just be like, no, you ended it. I don't care if you're apologizing, even though it was my fault. I don't want to be with you anymore. Again, that was because I was too much of a punk to just tell her that I didn't want to be with her. Now, both of those were obviously flawed strategies because they usually resulted in my staying in these relationships and wasting months, if not longer, with someone that I knew I had absolutely no future with. And before you get all judgy and shit of the 20-year-old version of me, part of my flawed thought process was that I hated seeing women cry. So that should get me some kind of points. And I figured that if I was just upfront with them, they cry and I'd feel bad. At that point in my developmental years, being upfront just didn't seem like a really good option. Matter of fact, in my developmental years, being upfront seemed like a downright bad option. I thought that my ways of breaking up, either not telling them at all and just hoping for something that happened and brick to fall on my head, or starting arguments with the hope that she would end it. I thought those were better, and I thought they preserved the woman's feelings, her self-esteem, and all of that. It's like, why would being honest and direct work? You know, who does that? At least that was my thinking when I was my 20-year-old self. Plus, I used to see friends of mine who were downright cruel in how they dealt with breakups with women. They were direct and upfront. They were just a little bit too direct and upfront. It's like, damn, that was kind of harsh. So it's that whole middle ground, you know. But at the time, I didn't want to be cruel like them. So I just didn't really know how to handle it. My way obviously wasn't the best way. Eh, anyway. And then, fortunately for myself and everyone else that I deal with nowadays, eventually, because maturity finally kicked in, at least in that area, or because I was sick of wasting time in relationships that were clearly over, I decided that the straightforward approach was probably best after all. Who knew? I can hear women thinking, saying, everybody but you, but not just me. A lot of guys do that or did that. And what I found by using the straightforward approach and finding the balance between being outright cruel, like my friends were, and being a punk, like I was, you can be upfront and still preserve someone's feelings. And that's not just in relationships, that's kind of how I feel in general. On this podcast, I'm often talking about being kind to each other and how cruel this world is and how we need to do a better job in just interacting with each other. But crime still happened after I had this epiphany, but not as much as I thought it would, which is proven to me that being honest and direct was always the way to go. You live and learn. Now, with that said, I understand that people mature at different rates. And unfortunately for me, my maturity in that area was rather rapid when you compare me to Sly Stallone and Phil Collins. Like I learned these lessons like when I was like in my 20s, maybe moving into 30, that hey, there's a way to do this that preserves everyone's feelings and integrity at the end of the day. But Sly is now 75 years old. Like I said, he married Jennifer 24 years ago, which would mean that he sent that FedEx when he was maybe in his early 50s, late 40s at the earliest, maybe early 40s, but he wasn't a young man. I'll put it like that. Obviously, I'm guesstimating on the age, but you get the point. He was too damn old to be sending someone that he was in a relationship with a breakup letter via FedEx. Okay. And Phil Collins, he's 70 years old now. His divorce to his second wife ended in 1996. So it's safe to say that he sent that breakup fax while he was in his early 40s, maybe mid 40s. Again, I'm guesstimating, but the conclusion is still the same, that he was too damn old to be sending breakup faxes to his wife. And while you were judging me earlier about being a punk and all of that stuff, I was ahead of the curve when looking at it in hindsight. By the time I hit 40, I was long into breaking up with women the right way. That sounded bad. I'm sorry. You get the point, though. The right way was the direct and honest way. Oh, yeah. Let me just say for emphasis, this wasn't like Sly breaking up with Jennifer, someone that he was in a relationship with. Phil was married to a second wife, again, emphasizing. They've been married for 12 years. I definitely would think that after 12 years, you would deserve more than just getting the fact saying, yo, I don't want to be with you. Was funny and in a vindictive way, on a side note, that I cannot blame her for this got out into the public because she put it out. Phil's wife, she put it out into the public. She actually sent the facts to the tabloids and they published it, which affected Phil's public um how people think of him publicly. I don't know the phrase that I'm thinking of for whatever reason, but his public image was hurt by that. But wow, hey, hey. And with all of that said, to think, wow, I lumped them both together and they both were foul in certain ways, it worked out for Sly. Sly found out that that kid wasn't his. He didn't have to wind up with the eccentric Janice Dickinson for a long term. And he wound up going back to Jennifer. They wound up getting married. And look at them now, 24 years later. A happy ending, a very strange journey to get to that happy ending, but a happy ending nonetheless. In closing, People, if you're going to break up with someone, there's a way to do that, especially as we grow and as we adult, and especially speaking of the demographic of the listeners of this show. Yeah, we should all be respectful in the way that we do things. And let me be clear, I'm talking about relationships and I'm talking about marriage. Now, if you meet somebody online or something like that and you have one conversation with them and then you decide that you don't ever want to speak to them again, I don't really think that you're doing the most harm or any harm whatsoever by ignoring their phone calls if they call you the next day. I guess ideally you should say that, okay, that conversation didn't go well. I don't think we're a good match, blah, blah, blah. But after one phone call, after one conversation, do you really owe someone that? And maybe you think, and maybe you do. Maybe you feel like maybe you feel like you do owe them that, or they owe you that. That's kind of a tough one. That's kind of a tough one. And while we can debate that, and that might be something that I will debate one day eventually, I think we can universally agree that once you've established that you are with someone in a relationship or marriage, you owe them a certain level of respect. That's all I have to say about that. The universe does it again. Thank you all for listening. Reggie, what did you think about that? Oh, Reggie didn't say anything. Reggie, are you going to say bye to the people? Well, Reggie's not saying anything. So I will say bye for both of us. Thanks for stopping by. Tell 50 friends to tell 50 friends. And until next time, yeah, I'll holler at you. Goodbye.